If a man already has a woman at home, a wife, a girlfriend, someone he shares a life with, but he keeps finding his way back to you, do not rush to call it love. That late night text, that lingering look across the room, that soft, careful voice, that confession that sounds like it cost him something, it all feels electric. It can make you feel like you were chosen for something rare, something most people never get to experience. But here is the truth that most people do not want to hear. Sometimes what feels rare is only risky. Sometimes what looks like destiny is just a man looking for relief. And if you cannot see that early, you can waste a lot of precious time trying to turn someone else's confusion into your love story. Stay with me, because this is where so many people get quietly hurt. What feels intense is not always real. What feels deep is not always love. What feels powerful is sometimes just a person borrowing your warmth because they do not know how to face the hollow feeling inside their own life. So before you decide this means something beautiful, slow down, take a breath, look closer than the feeling. The real question is not just why he keeps turning toward you. The real question is what he is running from, what hunger he is trying to feed, and what role you are being asked to play in a story that started long before you ever walked into the picture. Once you see that clearly, the whole thing begins to look very different than it did before. Most of the time, this is not a clean choice made from the heart. It is confusion dressed up as desire. It is longing pretending to be connection. It is a man reaching outside himself because he cannot sit inside his own discomfort for very long without looking for somewhere to escape. On the surface, it may look like he is torn between two women. But if you look deeper, he is usually torn inside himself between comfort and excitement, between duty and freedom, between the life he built and the life he secretly wishes he had chosen. When that internal split gets loud enough, he reaches outward. Not because he has found something true, but because he cannot sit with the question anymore. That is why he may seem so genuine with you, so soft, so honest, so open in ways he says he cannot be anywhere else. He may tell you things that sound completely real. He may say he has never felt this understood in his entire life. And maybe in that moment he means it. But people do not always chase what they truly love. Sometimes they chase what wakes up a part of them that has been sleeping too long. Sometimes they run toward whoever helps them forget the life they are too scared to change. That means his pull toward you may have far more to do with his own emptiness than with anything rare about the connection between you. Yes, your presence moves him. Yes, you may touch something genuinely real inside him. But that does not automatically mean he is ready or available or capable of loving you the way you actually deserve to be loved. This is where the trap begins, and it is a quiet trap, the kind you do not notice until you are already inside it. A person who feels starved on the inside can attach meaning very fast, dangerously fast. He may be carrying years of quiet frustration, unexpressed pain, hidden fantasy, old wounds that were never properly healed, and needs that were never spoken out loud. And when someone warm shows up, someone alive and open and present, he starts pouring meaning into that person at a speed that feels like magic. He tells himself this is rare. He tells himself this is something special. He tells himself this person is the missing piece he has been searching for. But what if he is not actually seeing you at all? What if he is mostly seeing his own hunger reflected back at him through your face? That is why these situations so often begin with fire and end in disappointment. Because the first thing that catches flame is not always truth. Sometimes it is projection. Sometimes it is fantasy. Sometimes it is a desperate person confusing emotional escape with something that was written in the stars. Listen carefully here, because this part matters more than most people realize. He may not be chasing the real you. He may be chasing the version of you that exists inside his imagination. You become a symbol to him. A symbol of freedom, a symbol of relief, a symbol of everything he believes is missing from his own life. And if you have ever felt deeply wanted by someone but strangely unseen at the same time, that strange invisible feeling is exactly why. He can desire you with full intensity and still not truly know who you are. At the beginning, everything feels charged with electricity. The chemistry feels unreal. The conversations feel rich and alive. The timing feels almost dramatic, like something greater than both of you arranged the whole thing. He tells you that you came into his world for a reason. He tells you that you make him feel alive again. He says being with you feels easier than anything in his current life, and maybe parts of that are true. Maybe you really do wake something genuine inside him, but then reality walks into the room. Your feelings become real. Your needs become real. Your questions become real. Your boundaries become real. And suddenly the dream starts developing cracks along its edges. The woman he reached for when he wanted comfort now wants clarity. The woman he admired from a distance now wants consistency. The private connection that once felt exciting now asks for honesty, for decisions, for courage, for real action taken in the light of day. And that is usually the exact moment he begins to pull back. Not because you lost value, not because the connection meant nothing, but because you stopped being a fantasy and became a real person with real weight and real expectations. No living human being can carry the burden of being another person's rescue story forever. That kind of connection collapses when ordinary daily life shows up, not because it went too deep, but because it was never stable enough to survive the truth. And if any of this sounds familiar, do not push that recognition away. It is trying to protect you from something that has already cost other people too much. There is something even deeper running beneath all of this that most conversations never reach. He may not only be chasing excitement or relief, he may be chasing parts of himself that he buried a very long time ago. Many men are taught from early in life to shut down anything that feels like softness, like need, like fear, like tenderness, like emotional hunger, even like joy. So they build a strong and controlled outer self while enormous pieces of their inner world get pressed underground where no one can see them. But buried things do not die, they wait. They build pressure, they look for a door, and then one day someone arrives who makes those sealed feelings begin to move again. And suddenly he feels something he forgot he was even capable of feeling. Through that person, he feels something like rebellion. Through her, he feels wanted in a way that surprises him. Through her, he gets to experience emotional intensity without having to admit out loud how hollow and numb he has quietly become. That is why this can feel much bigger than simple flirtation to him. It can feel like being rescued from himself. But do not confuse that feeling with readiness. Feeling more alive around you does not mean he is prepared to tell the truth to the people in his life, to take real responsibility, or to build something honest and clean from the ground up. Sometimes it only means he found a space where a hidden part of himself can breathe for a little while, and a little while is not the same thing as a future. Stay with me, because this is the line that most people cross without even realizing it until it is far too late to walk back without damage. This internal split is what creates the double life. He may genuinely still care about his partner. He may still value parts of the life he has built with her, but he may also deeply resent what that life shows him every single day, the routine, the duty, the responsibility, the image he has worked very hard to maintain, because the alternative means looking at things he does not know how to face. So instead of facing that conflict directly, he splits himself across two lives. One relationship holds safety. The other holds excitement. One carries order and stability and public respectability. The other carries desire and escape and the feeling of being intensely alive. This split allows him to avoid the hardest thing of all, which is bringing his whole honest self into one single relationship, because that would require real vulnerability, real accountability, real exposure to another person who sees everything, including the parts he would rather keep in the dark. It would mean letting one person see both the calm side and the restless side, both the loyal side and the hungry side, both the steady surface and the frightened thing underneath it. For many people caught inside this pattern, that kind of full exposure feels genuinely terrifying, so they keep things separated, one face for this world, another face for that world. And as long as those two worlds stay apart, he does not have to face the contradiction that is living inside him every day. But the moment the hidden connection begins asking for real shape, for real time, for honesty, for a place in his public life, fear rises fast, because what he wanted was often not a future. What he wanted was a private room where he could feel alive without having to rebuild anything, or face anything, or lose anything he was not ready to release. That is why being wanted in secret is nothing like being chosen in truth. The distance between those two things is enormous, even when the feeling in the moment makes them seem identical. So how do you actually know whether you are being genuinely chosen or quietly being used as someone's emotional exit door? The signals are almost always present, even when the feelings involved make them very difficult to read clearly. Watch what he does, not just what he says to you. A man who is truly choosing you will move toward honesty, even when it is painful and even when it costs him something real. He will not keep you tucked away in a corner of his life indefinitely. He will not give you only the hours and the pieces of himself that fit neatly between his existing responsibilities. He will not keep asking you to wait for a future that never seems to actually arrive, no matter how many months go by. If what he offers you is always private, always conditional, always depending on circumstances changing on their own, that is not a man choosing you. That is a man managing you. And there is a significant difference between those two things, even when the warmth he shows you feels completely real in the moment. Real choosing is uncomfortable. Real choosing asks something of a person. It requires disruption. It requires honesty with people who did not ask to be hurt. It requires sitting inside difficult conversations instead of running from them. If he only wants you in the soft, easy spaces and disappears the moment real courage is required, you already have your answer, even if he has never said the words out loud. You also need to ask yourself a harder question, one that most people spend a long time avoiding because the answer changes things permanently. What are you getting from this that keeps you in it? Because sometimes the intensity itself becomes the pull, the push and pull, the uncertainty, the moments of closeness followed by distance. It can create a kind of emotional grip that feels like deep connection, but is actually closer to anxiety, wearing the costume of love. When someone is only partly available, the mind works overtime trying to close the gap. You analyze the messages, you replay the conversations, you look for signs, and all of that mental energy can start to feel like passion, when it is actually just the nervous system responding to inconsistency. That is worth sitting with honestly. Because sometimes what keeps people in situations like this is not love for the other person. It is the hope that if they stay long enough, if they are patient enough, if they are understanding enough, the situation will finally become what they need it to be. And that hope, while completely understandable, is also one of the most expensive things a person can hold on to when the evidence is pointing clearly in a different direction. The most important thing you can walk away with from any of this is a clearer picture of what you are actually dealing with. Not the version that feels romantic, the version that is true. A connection that cannot exist in the open, that requires secrecy, that survives only in the gaps between someone else's real life. That connection is not built on solid ground, no matter how powerful it feels in the quiet moments you share. You deserve something that does not ask you to make yourself smaller or more patient or more invisible. You deserve to be someone's clear and honest choice made in the daylight, not a private comfort someone reaches for when the weight of their real life becomes too heavy to carry alone. Knowing this does not make the feelings disappear. Feelings do not respond to logic that quickly, and anyone who tells you otherwise has never actually been inside something that felt this real. But knowledge changes what you do next, and what you do next is the only thing you actually have full control over in a situation like this. You cannot change what he chooses. You cannot force someone into the kind of honesty they are not ready to offer. You cannot make a person leave a life they are too frightened to walk away from, no matter how real what you share might feel to both of you. But you can decide what you are willing to keep accepting. You can decide how long you are willing to exist in a space that asks everything from you, while offering you something that was never fully yours to begin with. That decision belongs entirely to you, and making it clearly is one of the most powerful things you will ever do for yourself. And here is something that nobody tells you when you are deep inside a situation like this. The longer you stay, the harder it becomes to see clearly. Not because you are weak, not because you are foolish, but because human beings are wired to attach. The more time you invest, the more the mind begins to build a case for staying. You start remembering only the best moments, the late night conversation that felt like it cracked something open in both of you. The way he looked at you like you were the only real thing in the room. The messages that arrived at exactly the right time when you needed to feel seen. And those moments were real. Nobody is saying they were not. But real moments inside an unstable situation do not automatically add up to a real future. And the longer you let those moments carry all the weight of your hope, the more difficult it becomes to pick up and walk towards something that could actually hold you properly. Time is not neutral inside situations like this. Every month that passes without movement, without honesty, without a single clear step forward, is a month that belongs to you and only you, that you are handing over to something that has not earned it. That is not romantic sacrifice. That is not patience being rewarded. That is just loss dressed up in the language of loyalty. And once you name it for what it is, the whole picture shifts. There is also something important to understand about the way hope works when you are emotionally invested in someone. Hope is one of the most powerful forces inside the human mind. It keeps people moving through genuinely hard times. It keeps people standing when everything around them is pushing them down. But hope can also become the thing that keeps you frozen in exactly the wrong place for exactly the wrong amount of time. When someone gives you just enough warmth, just enough closeness, just enough of a sign that things might change, hope grabs onto that and builds an entire story around it. And that story can be more compelling than reality for a very long time. You fill in the gaps with the best possible version of what could happen. You imagine the conversation he is going to have. You imagine the decision he is going to make. You imagine the morning when things are finally clean and honest and completely yours. But imagination is not a plan. And a person who has been giving you just enough for months without any real movement is not building toward that morning. They are managing the distance between losing you and facing the truth. And those are two very different things, even though from the inside they can feel almost identical. Watch the pattern, not just the moments. This is something worth saying again because it is so easy to miss when feelings are involved. A single beautiful conversation does not tell you much on its own. A single vulnerable confession does not show you who someone is at their core. What shows you who someone is the pattern. What happens after the beautiful conversation? Does he move closer or does he quietly retreat back to exactly where he was before? What happens after the vulnerable confession? Does he take a single concrete step or does life simply continue unchanged while you wait and hope and make space? The pattern is the truth. The pattern is what a person is actually built from underneath the feeling and the chemistry and the intensity of the early moments. And if the pattern you have been watching is one of warmth followed by distance, closeness followed by absence, forward movement followed by quiet retreat back to safety, then the pattern is already telling you everything you need to know. You do not need one more conversation to decode it. You do not need one more month to see if something changes. The pattern already answered the question. The only question left is whether you are willing to hear it. And this is where it gets genuinely difficult because hearing it means feeling it. It means letting the loss be real instead of keeping hope alive as a way to avoid the grief. Grief is the thing most people are actually running from when they stay too long in something that is not working. Not love, grief. Because if you leave, the hope ends, the possibility ends. The version of the future you built in your mind has to be released. And that release is painful in a way that is hard to explain to someone who has not felt it. Letting go of a possible future can hurt more than losing something you actually fully had. Because at least with something you fully had, it was real and complete and yours for a time. But a possible future that never arrived, that lives in the space between what was promised quietly and what was never actually delivered. Releasing that requires grieving something that technically never even existed. And that kind of grief is one of the loneliest feelings there is. Which is exactly why so many people choose to hold on just a little longer instead. Not because staying makes sense, but because the alternative means feeling something they are not sure they are ready to move through. But here is what is true about grief. It does not get smaller the longer you wait. It does not become easier to carry the more time passes while nothing changes. In fact, it usually grows. Every additional month of investment makes the eventual release harder, not softer. Which means the kindest thing you can do for yourself, even though it will not feel kind in the moment, is to stop waiting for a signal that may never come and start moving in the direction of your own honest life. Now let us talk about something that often gets skipped over in conversations like this because it feels uncomfortable to say out loud. Part of what makes these situations so sticky is not just what you feel for him. Part of it is what this situation gives to you. That is not an accusation. It is an honest observation that is worth sitting with privately. Sometimes being in a situation where someone is reaching toward you from another life gives you a particular kind of feeling that is hard to find elsewhere. It makes you feel chosen even inside a situation where you have not actually been fully chosen yet. It makes you feel special in a way that a straightforward, available person might not produce in you immediately. The intensity, the secrecy, the sense that he is risking something just to be near you, all of that can feel like evidence of how deeply he values you. And maybe it is. But it can also become something you start to rely on for your own sense of worth without fully realizing that is what is happening.